Hello ladies and gentlemen, Gabester here. This is the DPS guide for Normal and Heroic Beastlord Darmac. This encounter is overall fairly simple, probably a little bit more complicated than Gruul, but generally pretty easy. So the first thing to really know about this fight is that the ability Call the Pack is going to be used very frequently throughout the entire counter, and this will summon a series of 6 small beasts from the empty cubby, which is marked on our blue raid marker there. And these just need to be killed off fairly quickly with heavy area of effect cleave damage. So, if you are a DPS that can change your spec or talents or whatnot to increase your area of effect damage, this will help a lot in this fight. Likewise, if you have incidental area of effect damage, that sort of just hits targets near you, or you have a lot of dot damage, that will help to kill the heavy spears, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So plan around those two things accordingly, and you'll help out the raid quite a bit. So one of the main abilities that you'll see throughout the entire fight, if you're a ranged DPS, are these spears. And this is essentially targeting 2 or 3 random ranged players. You will see a small white circle underneath you, and you have just a second or two to move out of that circle. If you move quickly enough, a spear will hit that location, do a small amount of physical damage to players within 25 yards, but otherwise not really do anything. And you can kill it off slowly. Again, this is where dots or incidental area effect damage will be useful. However, if you do not move out of the white circle in time, the spear will pin you in place, and you'll be stunned, unable to perform actions until other players kill the spear for you. So, the best thing you can do is watch your timers, your boss mods or whatnot, see when the spears are about to be thrown, and sidestep out of it quickly so you get, out of range of it. But if you do happen to get hit as a ranged DPS, just call it out in your voice chat and have other people help kill it off for you. Pretty simple. Now the first prime beast that your raid will likely activate will be Cruelfang. And this special ability that you need to watch for as a DPS is Rend and Tear. He will target a random ranged player, so it's critical as ranged DPS throughout the entire fight that you stay spread around the room, usually about 7 to 15 yards apart from other players. When he jumps to that person, he will dot them with a Rend and Tear debuff, and this lasts 30 seconds, does moderate physical damage over time, but it stacks. So this is why spreading out is important. Generally speaking, for ranged, he will not target the same player twice, so you won't really have to worry about getting multiple stacks. For melee DPS, however, things are more difficult. The main thing you need to make sure is that when the boss leaps out to a ranged player during this phase, and from this point forward, in fact, you back out at least 7 yards away from that location, from the tank, because he will jump back to the tank's position and use another Rend and Tear at that location. And if he hits you multiple times in a row, as a melee DPS, you'll get stacks of the debuff and take quite a bit of physical damage that you can avoid. So, to help out the raid and the healers, try to step away from the boss when he jumps out, so that when he jumps back, you're not in range, and then you can move back into range after that and go about your business. Additionally, if you have the ability to remove enrage effects, watch for Savage Howl to be used while Cruelfang is active. This is just a buff that the boss will gain that increases attack speed, so make sure you soothe that off if you can do so. Ironcrusher is probably the simplest for DPS. There's really not a lot to think about. Range should continue to stay spread out. In this case, he will use Stampede, which again targets a random range player, but this time it hits anyone within 15 yards. However, even though the radius is much larger than Rend and Tear, because it is not a stacking debuff, it's just a one-time hit, it's not as important that multiple people avoid this. So if you're within 15 yards of another person, it's probably okay if you're ranged. And for melee, you can't really avoid the Stampede. It's going to hit you as soon as it starts, and you can't afford to lose the DPS by running out preemptively. So you just have to soak the damage, get healed up afterwards. Nothing real special about it. The boss will also use a Tantrum ability, which is unavoidable area of effect damage to the entire raid. But if you have a personal cooldown, you can use it during this time. However, usually you're going to want to save them for the final phase when you're fighting Dreadwing. Now typically when the boss reaches 45%, you will activate the final Prime Beast, which should be Dreadwing, because he's the most dangerous, generally speaking. So the number of abilities you have to dodge here are quite significant. The first important thing is, as ranged DPS in particular, when Dreadwing is about to be activated, when the boss is approaching 45%, make sure you're killing all of the existing spears around the room, because these spears during this phase will start to emit flames, and you don't want a number of spears active that are hurting everybody. So try to kill those off fairly quickly at this point. The other main thing to watch for is the breath attack. This is used in a random direction, you can see it there, and it will shoot out 3 spurts of fire in that direction. It has a pretty large cone, so try to stay close to the boss if you can without stacking on other players. When this breath hits, it does fire damage and applies a stacking fire dot. This can be dispelled with magic dispels, so if you can dispel yourself, that's great. Otherwise, just try to avoid it as best you can, and use a personal cooldown if your stack gets too high for some reason. The other thing to remember is that once Dreadwing himself is actually killed, and the boss is back on the ground at this point, he will have all the prime abilities up to this point in the fight. So this is where things get really dangerous. So once the boss has landed off of the mount for the final time, and you're pushing him below 40%, like you see here, this is where you want to use all your big DPS cooldowns. So Bloodlust, extra potions, all that good stuff should happen here, because this is the burn time. You want to try to kill the boss before the room gets too full of fire, before things kind of get out of hand, and especially if you have people dying here and there, you can sort of run out of DPS and healing and all that stuff. So burning him before he kills you is really important at this part. So that's really it. Mostly this fight is about spreading out if you're ranged, avoiding spears throughout, and if you're melee, avoiding rend and tear when he jumps back, and avoiding the breath at the end for everyone involved. So that is the DPS guide for Heroic and Normal Beastlord Darmac. As always, good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. You know, it's strange. I think Blizzard forgot that there's a 4th Prime Beast in this fight. It's you. When you click on that subscribe button, you'll go all primal on their ass. Yeah, I said it. I ain't afraid. You don't know me.